Your Business Podcast with Frank Furness.
Well, hi everybody and welcome to Sales School, and this is Frank Furness, where we're going to help you make more money by mastering sales, dominating marketing, and really being happy. In our next episodes, we're going to be taking a look at the psychology of sales, and I'm going to be joined by my really good friend Ian Halsall, where we speak about Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Okay, Ian, we've covered everything in the sales process now, but I'm sure there's some people listening out there saying, yeah, well, I know all of that stuff. That's obvious. Give me some of the real meaty stuff. Well, that's what we're going to give you right now. For those of you that want some of the real advanced techniques, we're going to give you a taster. We're going to give you some good stuff. Things like chunking, reframing, language patterns, meta programs. Ian, tell us about some of these advanced things, and let's take them one at a time and speak about it, and then maybe how we can apply it to sales.
With pleasure. The important thing to understand about NLP is that there are a range of people practicing NLP. Some people are kind of mechanical with it and clunky, and it's very technical. There are other people who use it very artfully or artistically, and I suggest strongly that you want to be an artful person, because in the early days of NLP it was just scripted. I mean, this was in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and it worked for some people, didn't work for other people. But if you use it artfully, it works with most people most of the time, and that's where the power is. If you want to use the best NLP for selling, I suggest you use NLP which is highly conversational. So you're using NLP techniques. The standard ones are reframing and anchoring. The more advanced ones are language patterns, but you're using them to a much more advanced level. I'll kick off by talking a little bit about reframing, because like I said earlier, for my money, it's the most powerful technique that a salesperson can use out of all of the NLP techniques. Reframing, like I mentioned, it's just about changing somebody's perspective. If you want to be a phenomenal salesperson using NLP, get good at reframing. Now, by way of illustration, I'm going to talk about a few examples. You see, the thing is, the human brain, if we talk about the N in NLP, the human brain doesn't operate by absolutes. It operates by relatives. So, Frank, if I was to say to you, £10, is that a lot of money? What would you say?
No, not at all.
Depending on what we're talking about. If I say £10 for a single paperclip, you'd probably say,
are you crazy?
Yeah, that's kind of a lot of money. If I said £10 for a brand new state-of-the-art notebook computer, you'd probably say,
let's have 5 of those.
Yeah, in fact, it'd be so low, you'd probably say there's got to be something wrong with it if it's that price. So things only really have a value when we start putting them relative to something. Now, this is really important with your sales presentation, because you're setting all the frames all the time. Because if you don't set the frames, guess what? The prospect is going to be setting them for you, and it might not always be that useful. I'll give you a few illustrative examples of reframing. When I was in Kuala Lumpur talking about name cards, which we are on this program, I got a bit low on name cards, so I was in town. I thought, I'll get a bunch printed up while I'm here. I went to the usual shop that I pop into, and there's the lady, and it's very nice, and I say, how much for a pack of name cards, a stack of 100? And she said, well, it's $28. And I said, okay. And I said, but while I'm here, I might get a few packs. So how much if I buy 3 packs of 100 each? And she said, 3 packs, we dropped the price from 28 to 25. My reaction, 28 minus 25. Well, they're almost the same. That's only 3 different. It's not a very big incentive for 3 times the order. So I was thinking, because I'm in the middle of just finished writing my latest book. So I forgot to mention it, goodness me. NLP for You, because I got fed up of finding it hard to recommend a book that actually handled reframing. And I was writing a few words, in fact, a fairly long chapter in the end on reframing. And I thought, what would be reframes? If I was selling like she was, what would be reframes I could use? So what I came up with was a few, but one was, okay, Mr. Prospect, if you want to buy 1 pack, it's 28. But if you buy 3 packs, you get the third at a 33% discount. All of a sudden, she's changed the frame. It sounds like a much better deal. Now, here's the interesting thing. It's the same product. It's actually the same price. but framing it in a different way makes it sound much more attractive. If that was an auditory version, if I was to give you a visual version, for those of you who are like photography, you're looking at a photograph, if you change the frame from, say, a plain white frame to a plain black frame to a ornate patterned frame, you change the impression of the picture. That's reframing. Oh, literally, in the case of picture frames, you're actually literally changing the frame. There's an example from cowboy movies. One of my favourite movies is The Magnificent Seven, and there's a beautiful illustration of reframing in that movie where the Yul Brynner character and the Steve McQueen character are looking to recruit the gunslinger portrayed by Charles Bronson. And they say, they're talking about the deal, and Charles Bronson doesn't want to go and fight against such odds. And Steve McQueen says, well, but you've faced worse odds than this in that Travis County thing. And Charles Bronson said, I got paid $800 for that one. And then your brother says, and there was this other thing. He said, yeah, and I got paid more for that one. So Steve McQueen says, you cost a lot. Charles Bronson says, yeah, that's right. I cost a lot. Then Yul Brynner says, we're paying $25. And they start walking off. And Charles Bronson calls after them, $25? Right now, that's a lot. So it depends. The human brain is always operating this way. It's always saying compared to what. And if you get onto using meta-model structures, a great thing with price objections is if somebody says to you, your prices are a high price, you're a high price, then they'll say, you just say, compared to what? And you're changing the frame. And then they're saying, well, because compared to Company X, you're a lot. Well, we're not, because Company X doesn't offer half of the things that we offer. So the thing is, the price in and of itself is never an objection. That's a really important thing in selling, by the way. The price in and of itself is never a problem. It's always the frame. And if you're going to be a great salesperson, you've got to get really good at reframing, saying the same thing from different angles. That's reframing in a nutshell. It's a big, big subject, as I'm sure you can imagine. I'm now going to go on to anchoring, which, if the whole world of NLP is about two very powerful bodies of ideas, it's reframing, which we've just covered, and anchoring. What is anchoring? Anchoring is a link between a state and an external stimulus. The stimulus can be anything, a sight, a sound, a touch, a smell, or a taste. And anchoring is important in selling because anchoring is happening all the time. And also, since one of the key reasons to have a sales presentation is to change the state of your prospect, anchoring is one of the biggest tools you've got. It's also, incidentally, a big way of changing your own state. So, what are examples of anchors? Well, it can be anything you like, really. A visual anchor might be an ornament or a lucky charm that you have. You see it and it reminds you of that time when things went very well for you. In marketing, anchors can be logos. If you go to a BP petrol station, you always get the same logo. The colours are an anchor and it all builds the brand. If you buy a Sony computer, the Sony lettering is always the same. It's the same font. In fact, a friend of mine who runs an advertising agency, he said when he was asked to do some work for Sony, he had this thick manual of how you say the words, how you print the words, the font you use, the colours, everything to keep it looking precisely the same. Why? Because it is a visual anchor. As indeed is any corporate logo, by the way. You don't go into one IBM office and see it written one way, and then in another IBM office written a different way, and on an IBM PC written a different way again. It's all the same. Kinesthetic anchors can be touch, or a hug, or a feel of a piece of clothing, or a feel of a fabric. So that's visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. What are examples? Well, a favourite one for auditory anchors is the hour song phenomenon. If a couple, and you might have had this yourself, if you see a couple in a restaurant, they might not be getting on 1 minute, and then some music comes on, and they look at each other and they go, they're playing our song. So hearing that song reminds them of previous times when they've heard that song, and it fires that state or triggers that state. So anchors are really important. They're important in your sales presentation. Question: What anchors are you firing in your sales presentation? This can be really important. For example, if you dress a certain way, and maybe, and this could easily happen, you dress the same way as somebody who they really don't like, you dress that way, you're firing off that visual anchor. Now, chances are, consciously they're not thinking about it, but you've just blown the sale because you've fired the wrong anchor. Another one, I won't mention any brands, is I used to do business many years ago with a guy who was, how do I say this, ethically not that great. And he wore this very expensive wristwatch. For obvious reasons, I won't mention the name, it would be unfair. But it was a certain distinctive brand of expensive wristwatch. Now, guess what happens every time I see somebody wearing that brand of wristwatch? It reminds me of that guy who wasn't that ethical. And so people like that. Now, I know NLP, so I know what's going on. But if I didn't know NLP, I'd be feeling bad, but I wouldn't know why I was feeling bad. Another example, this is a true life one with me building sales with a company that I more than quadrupled their purchases from me. The company boss was a golfer, and I was working for a big corporation who had its own branded logo on golf balls. And so this guy said, Ian, can you get me some of those golf balls, please? And I went, okay. So I went to a bit of trouble. I thought, this is going to be good. I'll generate a bit of goodwill, won't cost very much, and I'll deliver these golf balls by hand. So I went into his office with these golf balls in my briefcase, in a nice gift pack. And I said, how are you doing? And he said, not very good, actually. My wife's car has just been stolen, and I was just talking to the police about it. So, Frank, what do you think I did with the golf balls?
Tell me.
I kept them in my briefcase, because if I give them to him, and a lot of salespeople will do this, they think, oh, the poor guy, I want to cheer him up, I want to win him over, I want to make a little deposit. Well, that will work to a degree, but what am I doing at the same time? I'm giving him a little anchor.
What's he always going to, when he sees those golf balls, he's always going to have a bad memory and he's not going to think too well of you.
Exactly. So he's going to maybe put them in a cupboard for a month, forget about them, and then all the stuff about the car is blown over. A bit later he opens that, feels bad, maybe or maybe not, he might be consciously aware of it, but the chances are pretty good it'll be unconscious, and he'll be thinking and feeling something negative associated to me. So I keep them in my briefcase.
What about, I work with a lot of sports people. Would some of them have anchors, like some of them might wear a lucky little necklace that they'll actually feel, or when they run out onto the field, they'll run and they'll touch the ground 3 times. Is that an anchor?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, kinesthetic anchors, particularly for sports people, are very, very powerful. So if they touch something, or they might wear a certain item of clothing, so they feel that fabric, and that triggers that state. It's very important. Golfers, pre-shot rehearsal, all of these kind of things. Very, very important. The other thing is what kind of things you use when you're making your sales presentation. And this is a really delicate one. We were talking in the break about videos. How to use videos. I once went along to a big life insurance company in Southeast Asia, and they had this little cartoon, and I'm thinking, okay, and it was a cartoon to illustrate a message, but I'm thinking, okay, what state will that put the audience into? When do guys normally watch cartoons? It's when they're at home, relaxing, half nodding asleep with a cup of tea or a can of beer or something, and the kids are playing and they're not paying particular attention. So the instant you use video, you use cartoon, what state are you triggering? A state of half asleep, feet up, nodding off. And I looked at the audience, and guess what they were doing? They were half asleep, nodding off. And it was an expensive video too.
Now, Ian, what about, for me, I have what I call my pair of lucky cufflinks, because I always close sales with those. Is that an anchor?
Yeah, well, it's 2 types of anchors. It's an anchor for you, and it's an anchor for the person you're dealing with. The most important thing is your state. And if lucky cufflinks, oh, by the way, there's a lot of debate on luck, whether luck exists or not, and I'm not going to go into that on this program, but what I will say is they are lucky if you believe they are. And if you feel lucky wearing them, then they become an anchor. They become a kinesthetic anchor as you feel them, as you're putting them on, or as you're fiddling with them. They're also a visual anchor because you look at them. So yes, absolutely. Now the other thing is, and this is the delicate one, I'll tell you something personal which I don't share with a lot of people. Many years ago when I was single, I thought, how am I going to get a new girlfriend? And I decided to join a dating agency. And I met some nice ladies on it, so I just paid my money and phoned them up, said, oh, hi, do you want to meet and go and have a cup of tea? And some of them I got on with, some of them I didn't. And some of them I thought, I'm expecting it to go well, and it's not. And so it's a little bit like a sale, really, and I thought, why is it the ones I think ought to have gone well didn't go well? And it was only when I got into this I started to understand. Because for some prospects, they'll look at your cufflinks and go, looks good, looks upmarket. For some other people, it go, oh, yeah, I remember, I had this business colleague that, that guy ripped me off, and he wore cufflinks just like those. And you just don't know what anchors you're going to fire off, and it can be devastating to your closing ratio. So, what do you do about it? Go neutral wherever you can. Dress no particular way that draws people's attention. There are people who say, wear this brand of wristwatch, wear that brand of clothes, and I think, well, okay, if that's what you're really into and it really makes you feel great, then maybe. But as a general principle, you might fire off anchors and you don't want them to be fired off. So with me, and again, it wouldn't be fair to the manufacturers to mention names, but there's one brand of clothing that one guy I didn't like in the slightest insisted on wearing, and it was one of these designer labels. So guess what? Every time I see a guy dressed like that, I get this little jitter. And it's only 5 minutes later I might consciously be aware of it. And this is why the unconscious mind is so important. So only fire anchors if you're pretty sure you're going to be firing the correct anchor that's going to elicit the state that will be positive.
Now, Ian, on anchors, I don't know if I maybe got this right. What if you had to have something that would put you into a positive frame of mind? So if I had a lucky pen that really I know that I'm going to close a lot of sales, would that almost be an anchor for me to feel good if I've got that pen in my pocket?
Absolutely. Yeah, and use it. When I teach students to pass exams, anchors are terrific because what's the biggest thing that makes people get a grade A or a grade D? Often it's exam nerves. Their state is lousy. So I say, do your revision, go through your notes the night before, the day before, and when you're in a nice calm state, wear a certain shirt, a certain wristwatch, have a certain pen, maybe even if you're very, and a lot of people are very olfactory, get a little handkerchief with a few drops of perfume or aftershave on it, and that fires that anchor. So you can have visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory. If you like a certain type of peppermint, you can even have a taste anchor. And exams, there's no rule as to how many anchors you can take into the exam room. Your little lucky pen, your lucky cuddly toy, you name it, and it's all within exam rules.
Right, so think about what anchors you can use, but also those that you shouldn't be using.
Well, negative anchors kill sales more than anything else, and there are obvious ones which are fair to generalize. If you're driving your prospect in your car and your car is untidy or messy or sloppy, there's a good chance that'll remind you of other untidy, sloppy people. If the interior of your briefcase looks like a bomb's gone off in it, same thing. So there's things that are very safe bets. Haircuts, these kind of things, very, very safe bets. And so the thing is to do things where you're building rapport. So if it's clothing, I go to a paper mill or a manufacturing operation, I'll often dress the way that the guys will dress, but I'll have a neat haircut because neat haircuts usually go as an anchor for being efficient, a little bit on the military side maybe, but people like it to be a little bit on the efficient side rather than a little bit on the sloppy side. And by the way, once you get into this subject, it is truly amazing how many anchors are being fired all the time. Only now you're aware of them.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed today's podcast. And remember, if you'd like to book me to speak at your next conference or do some sales training, either in person or via Zoom remotely, please drop me an email, frank@frankfurness.com. Also, please take a look at my website, frankfurness.com, and take a look at some of my courses on productivitycenter.com. Remember also to connect with me on all of the social media channels. They're all under Frank Furness, especially LinkedIn, where I'm almost up to 30,000 And every day I have some great new ideas and tips on sales, marketing, speaking, and anything that will make you money. Hey, this is Frank. See you in the next episode.